Okay. Okay. So Kaushik, I will start now. The attendee set has reached a significant number.
Yep, please go ahead.
Okay. So very good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's live panel discussion on Beyond the COVID-19 Crisis, what awaits the Indian CV industry. This session is organized by the team at Commercial Vehicle Forum, or as we are more popularly called, CVF. While I was looking at the registrations, I noticed a lot of you are already aware of CVF. However, for those of you who aren't, just to give you a quick introduction, Commercial Vehicle Forum is India's premium C-level CV event. And in the past week, that is on the 5th of May, we would have had the 5th edition of our event in Pune. However, Corona had other plans in store for us. In fact, for all of us, given the current situation, we've had to postpone our event for the second half of 2020, and we await government guidelines on the way forward so that we can share more details on this. In the meantime, however, some of you reached out to us and asked us to organize a live session, and therefore we are here today. Also, I wanted to take this chance to quickly thank each and every one of you for the overwhelming response. As I look at the attendee numbers, we are completely full. Our webinar is completely full. So thank you so much for the positive feedback and support. Really appreciate it. And before we jump into this, just wanted to share a few ground rules. First of all, I would request all of you to direct any questions that you may have to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I'm asking you to do that as it will help us to refer your questions in a focused manner. So please note once again, all questions in the Q&A section below. Other than that, we will be running some polls during the session to keep the session interactive. So I invite you to please share your insights. Lastly, I hope you enjoy this session and find it useful for your business. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's moderator for the session, Mr. Kaushik Madhavan, Vice President Mobility, Frost & Sullivan. Over to you, Kaushik.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rohit. Indeed, you're absolutely right. COVID-19 this year has put a spanner in the works for many of our plans. But the positive side to that is, we all have the opportunity to interact with each other on the virtual web. So welcome everyone once again, panelists and the participants. Very quickly to introduce myself, my name is Kaushik Madhavan and I manage the mobility business unit at Frost & Sullivan. Let me take a few minutes to introduce the panelists for today. We've got an illustrious set of panelists. We have Mr. Nitin Seth, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Ashok Leyland. Mr. Seth is a very, very popular figure within the CV industry, who does not need any introduction. He has over 2 decades of experience in the automotive industry, at sales, marketing, and before Ashok Leyland, also head of the car product group at Tata Motors. So welcome, Mr. Seth, to the webinar today. We then have Mr. Diego Graffi, who is the CEO and MD at Piaggio in India. Mr. Graffi, again, has had a very, very rewarding career over the years with over 2 decades of experience in the auto industry. And before joining Piaggio Group in 2005, he was also looking after Piaggio in Italy and Southeast Asia. So he's got a very, very wide range of international focus and experience. So welcome, Mr. Graffi, to this webinar. Our next panelist is Mr. Shankar, who is the CEO of TVS Supply Chain Solutions. Again, a very popular figure in the supply chain space. He has, in his role, Shankar also manages the P&L for the India region and all the operations, including the joint venture companies. He has over 30 years of experience looking at, marketing, branding, product planning, supply chain and logistics, and a very, very rich experience set. Welcome, Mr. Shankar, to the webinar. Our next panelist is Dr. Dev Mukherjee, who is the Managing Director of Omega Seiki Mobility. Dr. Mukherjee has been in the automotive industry in India for the past 35 years, with over 10 years of CEO level positions for a variety of global MNCs and Japanese companies in India. And he's now, on the board of Omega Seiki as a partner and managing director. Welcome, Dr. Mukherjee, to the webinar. And we then have Mr. Shailesh Zinge, who is the director of marketing and growth initiatives at Cummins India. Of course, Cummins is a brand that needs no introduction. Shailesh has been in this role, as the marketing and growth initiative leaders for the engine and components business unit, responsible for product planning, program management for both on-highway and off-highway market segment. Welcome, Shailesh, to the webinar. So,
thank you.
Gentlemen, these past couple of months have been very, very challenging in the wake of the COVID-19 situation, especially with the slowdown in the automotive industry, which we saw in 2019. Coinciding with the COVID-19 pandemic that hit us, let's say, January, February this year. So it has become a bit of a double whammy that has had a compounding effect on the slowdown of the industry. Very clearly, this has had a far-reaching impact across vehicle segments. So not only the commercial segment that we are focusing on today, but also the passenger vehicle segment, the logistics area, and even shared mobility. So we have seen, a significant impact, on all these segments, especially on the growth opportunity. So everybody has had to relook their forecast, their outlook for 2020, maybe even for 2021. So I would like to request, all of you panelists to start with your opening comments, just about a minute or two, to give us your perspective on how you see. Obviously, everybody knows about the COVID-19 situation, but I would like you, if I can request you to focus more on the recovery side of things. How do you see the next 6 to 12 months in India? How do you see India recovering from the slump as a result of COVID-19? So if I can invite Mr. Seth to first give his thoughts and how he sees from Ashok Leyland's perspective the recovery over the next 12 months. Mr. Seth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kaushik. Good morning. Since we have to focus on recovery, as you're aware, auto industry is around 8% of the GDP and employs more than 4 crore people across the value chain from supplier all the way to dealers. So recovery is very important for our economy to grow. So given that we have passed the so-called, I'll say the down of the cycle of the COVID issue, what we are expecting now, for example, some of the areas are becoming green zone. So what is the recovery plan now? Obviously, there are 3 parts to the story. One is that we open up the plant. Then there are supply issue challenges, which we are trying to solve because many of the suppliers are in Z zone. Then there are dealers. And then there are consumers who have to see the demand from the industry, bring it by workshops, vehicles to the workshop and start repairing and waiting for some of the demand to generate. And the idea, which is the last one, is to say, how do we generate the demand? What we are working with NBFCs, which I know are today in a struggle mode, how do we bring the demand back? Their government, I'm expecting government to play a lot of initiatives to generate the demand, to maybe to start with the consumer durables and partly FMCGs, followed by infrastructure demand, which will bring roads, highways, railways to bring some kind of investment into the various infra project, which will increase the demand for the commercial vehicles. And from the buses side, similar to where this happened in 2008, when government started to purchase a lot of buses for the state transports, so that generates a demand. So I think the government is going to play a role, and so is the industry. Our job as an OEM will be to keep the things ready, help the supply chain, and help our dealers to stay afloat while this demand. I know all of the supplier as well as dealers are going through bad times in this whole scenario. We are helping them to stay afloat, helping the customer in this bad time to ensure no vehicle goes off-road, while partly working towards with the government and the state governments to generate demand, especially in buses and trucks as well. Hopefully the GDP starts improving. First 3 months is going to be pretty bad. The next 3 months is what we feel, that things will improve, and hopefully by festival time, it will be much better. So I think we are optimistic that by the time Ganesh Chaturthi happens in August, and followed by the Shara and Diwali time, things will start returning to normal. But in this 6 months, we hope that we are able to sustain this downward trend and help our partners, both our dealers, our vendors, and also many of our customers to survive this downturn. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Seth. Now I'll come to you, Diego. I think Mr. Seth, touched upon, a very, very important point, which is the 3 parts to recovery, right? Opening plants of the CV manufacturers and the suppliers. Number 2, opening up dealers. And number 3, connecting with the fleet customers. So as a CV manufacturer in a different segment, right? Do you also feel and share Mr. Seth's, 3-part recovery plan that you need to focus on over the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, definitely, I very much agree with what you are saying, in the sense that okay, let me put it in this way. My assessment is that the timing for recovery, at least for the segment that we address as Piaggio, so both commercial vehicle and two-wheeler, at this point in time, according to me, it's very difficult to say how long it will take. And I explain why. Because it will very much depend also on how much this current situation, lockdown extension, restrictions, or further relaxation will be in place. Because honestly, I have to say that we have already, as a company, at the 5th consecutive plan for next 6 months, and every time that we make a plan, we have to review completely the assumption behind that plan, because due to continuous extension of this situation. So now we are very keen to know what is going to happen after 18th of May, or the way forward May and June. My point is that if we do not see in the next 2 or 3 weeks a complete recovery of the entire ecosystem, that means, as Mr. Seth was correctly saying, both operation, supply chain, and dealers, that is the 3 essential parts that have to revive operation completely, with maybe, how to say, restriction in terms of following guidelines for health and safety of people and customers, but with the possibility to do their job, to come back to do their job, to come back creating demand on ground, and let me say, to manage relationship with customer. If this is going to happen, I'm also of the idea that for sure we'll have to face 2 or 3 months of big difficulties in terms of conversion of inquiries coming from customers into effective detail, due to a lot of reasons. And maybe in the following 3 months, when we approach festive season, we could see some quicker response and some faster reaction. But definitely it will very much depend on what is the scenario that is going to come in front of us in the next 5 to 6 weeks, in terms of, as I was saying, putting the entire ecosystem, automotive ecosystem, back to work completely and fully. So what we have seen in the last 1 week, since when we resume operation in our plant, is we have been struggling with huge difficulties due to disruption in supply chain, due to unclarity on rules on ground level, because every state is imposing his own rules for restarting supply chain. So what we expect is that now onwards there will be more clarity, more, how to say, parity of condition for restarting supply, for restarting dealer, pan-India. If it is going to happen, I'm also of the idea that it will take 2 to 3 months, but after that, I'm optimistic that we can see some good recovery.
Perfect. Thank you, Diego. I now come to you, Shankar. I think to continue on what Diego said. Obviously, you have a very, very ground level perspective. Having managed logistics solutions and fleet operations. So, one of the points you made during our earlier discussion was every state, seems to have their own characteristics, and cross-border, challenges has been one of the key areas, cross-state borders. Like Diego mentioned, hopefully over the next couple of weeks, there will be a lot more clarity in terms of how the implementation of easing the lockdown is going to become more and more, let's say, more clear, in terms of the ground level reality. So do you also agree to that? Do you also see, hopefully over the next 2 to 3 weeks, there'll be a lot more clarity and help the logistics service providers to resume operations in a more seamless manner? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Kaushik. What has really happened is that, things have been evolving day on day. Things are not static. And if you really look at what happened, and since, like we said, we are a supply chain company, so we've been operational for some essential part, whether it's food staples or whether it is FMCG or some amount of financial services. We service one of the largest ATM manufacturers, telecom, technology. There are a lot of businesses that were open even during this lockout period. If I see what's happening, and interstate movement of goods was anyway allowed for all goods. But the challenges have been that even if you are sending a truck, there is no one to unload it. And therefore, the trucks were getting stuck. And each state government was implementing it in a very different manner, because the whole idea was, how do I contain it and flatten the curve, etc., which rightfully so lives. But now the governments have realized that that could not be the only approach. There are other companies, and we are a global company. When we look at it weekly, we have a global call to understand what's happening in other parts. In many places, including China, things are coming back to normal pretty fast, faster than what anyone anticipated. Australia moved into opening up recently. Even Spain and Italy have started opening up now. Even cafes and bars are opening around in those locations. So what I'm trying to say is that all these things are to be looked at from a very localized viewpoint. Even the containment areas are getting redefined now. Earlier, an entire street was considered containment. I think a couple of days ago, a notification had come, only a few buildings can be called containment zone. So this whole thing can be controlled with a very aggressive strategy of how do you contain, how do you track and trace and test, and therefore don't allow this pandemic to be freely flowing. If that approach of being very localized, and rather than looking at it India as a whole country approach comes in, I think a lot more easy of doing business and ease of moving goods will happen. And I am seeing it progressively improving. If you were to ask me 1 month ago, could you have ever done an up-country movement? I would have said no way. But today we can comfortably move goods from South India to North India, North to West in a reasonable period of time. I'm not saying there are no bottlenecks. In a reasonable period of time, we are able to do that. So I think things are opening up. People have understood how to manage it and how to live with it. In terms of recovery, my take is that, like what Nitin said and what Diageo said, at least for next 6 months, I don't think things going back to normal. Like we were speaking before, we got to learn to live with a new world and live in a different kind of environment. But slowly things will start improving. 6 months is what I give it for things to come back to a bit of what we would have assumed as a normal. I mean, what base you are taking? Are you taking a base of last year? Are you taking a base of previous quarter, etc.? Depends upon each organization. But somewhere in the next 6 months, we will come back to learning to live with it, some kind of a recovery of economic activity. Most economists, other than the IMF, are saying that we will be in the negative territory for this whole year. There will be a contraction. But even then, after 6 months, things will start improving. And I think October onwards, we will see a much better overall economic activity, which means whether it is a commercial vehicle or supply chain or logistics industry, all of us will see some kind of activity which will make meaningful sense for us to proceed on.
Excellent. So I think I'll come to you, Dr. Mukherjee, now. Taking off from what Shankar said, especially you also operate in a segment which is focusing on, let's say, last mile connectivity and last mile delivery solutions with their electric three-wheeler, which is containment zones. And sealing of containment zones has a direct impact on last mile connectivity and last mile delivery solutions. Now, considering that, how do you see your product segment evolving? How do you see the challenges that you are facing, especially when you have to deliver goods to, let's say, the smaller retailers, the local kirana stores, for example, or maybe even to housing societies or individual apartments? How do you see that challenge, from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Kaushik. You see, as colleagues in the panel have already explained, this is a totally unprecedented situation. which suddenly came from nowhere. Even pre-COVID, the industry has had its challenges. The industry, especially the commercial vehicle, was stressed and we had contraction. But this is a complete, as we call it, a complete demand stall, just a vertical fall, completely unexpected, unprecedented. Now, coming back to the challenges, I can, sort of articulate as what Nathan said. We have to see on both sides, on the supply side as well as on the demand side. The supply side challenges are, of course, the starting the supply lines, manufacturing, and all. The auto industry employs a very complex supply chain, as we know. There are various kinds of materials and products, and have to come from all over the country and even abroad. And the challenges are, after opening, as things are evolving now, and a lot of things are not clear. In fact, there is a lot of clarity needed on what is allowed, what is not allowed, and there are local, rules and regulations being deployed. So that is a big question mark in everybody's mind. We have to wait and see how things evolve. But I think at a macro level, at the government level, there is a strong realization now. Now we have open, and we have kind of bottomed out, and there has to be a recovery. Now I don't know. There are various versions. There shape or W shape that we'll have to wait and see. As far as that is a thing, and on the supply side. And a lot of MSMEs, I think, will have some announcements, and liquidity, and we will be taken care of up to a certain extent. We'll see how it comes, but this is a positive step. Second issue is always the the workers redeployment, the reverse migration, as we call it. That we'll have to handle. It is going to be a challenge. We'll have to handle that because you need drivers in our operation. You need operators, you need the service technicians to service the vehicles. So that is a challenge for us. On the demand side, of course, as everybody pointed out, there is a complete demand fall. Now, to crank up the demand, there will be at various segments, there will be different initiatives. Like infrastructure probably has to come from government. On the in our segment, which is the last mile delivery, we are focusing on, and we have our own electric vehicle, which is the new upcoming technology shift that we have from the engines to electric vehicles. So I see that one of the segment which will probably spring back quickly is the e-commerce, because there is a lot of pent up demand. And there were restrictions as to essential, non-essential, and like that. So once these restrictions are getting lifted, e-commerce will bounce back, and that is where we will have to deploy quickly. But at the same time, we'll have to be very aware of the local rules and regulations and what is allowed, what is not allowed. At the same time, I think we'll have to live with this. The new normal has become the new, jingo, that we have to take the protections, whether it is mask or sanitizer or the contactless deliveries and all those things. We'll have to sort of make these as our SOPs. This is what I feel. But to summarize, I think that next 3 months, in this financial year, already 2 months are gone, so we can start from June, and the next 3 months are going to be very, very tough. Hopefully by the festival time, and we expect to have a good monsoon. So we after that, around the festival time, say September, October or so, I do see a revival. And best case to me would be we end up with a zero, growth, or no contraction. I hope that's the best case scenario to me.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee. So Shailesh, I'm coming to you now. I think you're in a unique position, as Cummins, as a global tier 1 supplier, you actually form the bridge between the OEM on the one hand and the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers as well. So obviously, a lot of them are MSME companies. They are facing challenges today due to the liquidity crisis. So as a tier 1 aggregator, how do you see yourself bridging the challenges faced by the tier 2, tier 3 supplier community, which are still struggling to come up and running. And on the other hand, the demand from the OEMs as they start opening up their plants and start production. So as a tier 1 supplier, how do you see yourself?
Thanks, Kaushik, for that. I think that's an important question. And just before I answer that, I think we talked about it's a very unprecedented situation, maybe once in 100 years. So we don't have right or wrong answers. It's a perspective, and we believe it's more of a test of a leadership of each organization as to how do we navigate through these uncertainties in the most effective way, keeping employees, business, and long-term growth in mind. I think that's the biggest challenge. And how do we balance between these three major goals and come out of this in a much stronger way than what we actually entered into? I think that's the focus we as Cummins looking at, in terms of get opportunity out of this situation. Having said that, I think we are in a bridge where it's quite challenging right now because we have hundreds of suppliers and both into different parts of the geography in India, impacted with different kind of rules. There is that's on the supplier side. On the OEM side, there is quite a good amount of uncertainty. Certainly from the demand perspective. So I think we have to balance that in a much better way by, on the supplier side, collaborating with them on an hourly basis to look at how do they start operations, how can we pass on our learnings from global safety regulations, how do we live with the new norm of social distancing, how do we acclimatize their supply chain and their production in a way to take care of these regulations, which are overnight. I think that's one focus what we are working on very closely, and we're tracking them almost on our basis as to how do they ramp up production with limited capabilities, and also try to address on the migrant worker side, which has been the biggest challenge for the supplier end. And I believe yesterday's news about the infusion of liquidity through collateral free automatic loans should in some way, if it's get transferred in an effective way, should help the supplier community. On the OEM side, I think what we are very closely working on, how do we narrow down on different scenarios? Because there are different scenarios on the projections which we are getting, and some very some optimistic and some others on a very scary side. So I think there is complete efforts on how do we narrow them so that we can work on the supply chain much better way. If we have a difference of between a pessimistic situation and an optimistic situation, 1:4, it becomes more challenging. So that's an effort to look at how do we narrow that gap and collaborate on our understanding on the market. And certainly, I think what is this is the time where the investments from the major organizations are pushing up, at least on the 2020 side. So we're looking at how can we support through our various platforms where we operate on highway, off highway, power gen, different segments. How can we leverage our other platforms to bridge the investment gaps which are coming up due to this situation? So I feel, in next couple of months, we should have the supply chain up and running in whatever shape we have, and that should help in getting more clarity and more better insights on the demand for the rest of the year, and that's the focus what we have, and our engagement on the OEMs have been multifold increase in that front. So that we together come out of this in a much stronger way.
Excellent. I think that's a good point you make, Shailesh. I think engaging the supply chain and engaging with the tier 2, tier 3 component manufacturers in a more proactive way, I think is going to be the way forward. So at this point in time, I must thank all the participants who have joined this webinar. Rohit, if we can run the first poll question at this time, in terms of how the participants feel normalcy, when the participants feel the normalcy will return to the Indian CV sector. If we can have that poll question
Yeah,
online, please.
just launching it. Kaushik is launching it.
Yep.
Everyone should see it on the screen. Would request you to please
Excellent.
cast
If
your
we
votes.
can
Even
request all of the participants, yeah,
even the panelists can join in. So we have. Okay, so we're just casting the votes. We have more than 60% already there.
Excellent, excellent. Can we have the results online?
Yeah, I'm just waiting because there is a neck and neck. Everybody seems to be really positive. Just a few more seconds. I'll just post it there. Yeah, so more than 80% people have voted. I'm just going to end the poll now. Thank you, everybody. So the results are on your screen.
Thank you, everyone. Can we have? There you go. I'm really happy to see such an optimistic response from the participants. 80%, 85% feel that the recovery will be in the next 12 months. I'm really happy to see the optimism there. Although, in fact, some of the panelists, who spoke earlier, also share that the industry, not only wishes to come back on track much earlier. There is also a feeling that the painful situation will be sooner over than a lot of people expect. So, with that, let me come to you, Mr. Seth. You spoke about the three parts of recovery, which is very relevant. One of the key areas that a lot of OEMs today have faced is the labor problem. So my discussion point is a two-part question, or two-part point, which I would request you to address. The first one is obviously engaging, with the production personnel and the labor challenges that every OEM today is facing. How does Ashok Leyland intend to tackle that situation? Because one of the points which Diego also made today is the emphasis on health and safety. So there is, on the one hand, the need to maintain social distancing and to rotate the workforce so that we maintain sufficient levels of safety and health. So that's one part. The second part is, a lot of OEMs today, in fact, are talking about shared resources. And one among them is also a shared warehouse or shared inventory, because today the dealers are finding very difficult to invest in their own stockyard or a warehouse individually because of the liquidity thing. So there is a discussion among the industry stakeholders to see if multiple dealer principals can come together and have a shared facility and a shared warehouse with some investment from the OEM also. How do you see this? Do you think this is going to help some of the dealer principals reduce their overheads and become a little more liquid? So these are the two areas that I want you to talk about. The first one, like I said, is sorry, please go ahead.
So I think thanks. I think the first one, as you said, since you just started last week, today you're allowed 25 to 30% of your workforce in, and you have to maintain those norms, and social distancing, safeties are all paramount to any organization. And our workforce is the most trained workforce you have. So you would like to ensure no health is compromised. Yes, we are facing some little challenges just now because some of the contractual workforce, as you're aware, a lot of OEMs, all of us mostly, work with a ratio of permanent to contractual employees on your shop floor. So some of those trained contractual labor is slightly, I'll say some of them have gone to their rural side. Hopefully they'll come back. Today you started with 30% of your labor in your plant. And it's the same kind of safety norms what we have just spoke about in the company. We are also being in transparent discussion with all our supply chain because at the end, their safety is very important, that they should also employ the similar safety, so that in the whole value chain, we don't want, once we start the plant, that we get shut down because supplier has a challenge with his workforce because of safety, or some mishap happens there. So it's not only us in our value chain, our supply chain partner, to be very clearly maintaining the same safety and security for the employees. Because once you start, you start ramping up. Today you're at 25% workforce inside the plant as per the norms. As you move towards the festival time, you will start ramping up, and you might come down to 80-90% of your capacity utilization as you move towards the festival, and hopefully by January you're working at your full capacity. So it's not about short term. We need to ensure from now till the full ramp up, there is no, I'll say, a gap of or use any breakdown of any safety norms, neither by us, neither by the supply chain. So this is very paramount, and we really believe, and we are requesting our vendor partners to be on the same page, because that is very critical. Because today you are aware the technology at the plant, even for the components, what is coming because of Euro 6 norms is very, very critical, and we have trained our workforce very well. We do not want to lose any workforce because it is a complicated vehicle from first deployment, which is Euro 6 or BS6 you call it. Coming to the second part, which is your dealer. That is so one side I spoke about vendors on back side, and front side is our dealer. We all know dealers' absorption of their cost. If they don't absorb more than 50% from their service, the dealership ends to lose money. So that means 50% of his cost can be absorbed by the service load, and 50% has to be absorbed by the sales. That means that in the sales, one of the most critical elements you rightly picked up is the inventory cost. Normally we work with 15 days. We may have to even prune down to work with 7 days kind of inventory if dealer has to be healthy. Idea is not to park a vehicle, because there are multiple models and multiple variants and multiple wheelbases, let's say in a truck industry. Similarly in a car industry, color and model mix. Idea is to have a better forecasting. Therefore, IT plays a very big role. Am I capturing the dealer inquiry well? Am I able to forecast? And based on that forecast, am I able to get the items from the company on time? I think idea is not to park an inventory somewhere in the system, or idea is to ensure the forecasting model and data capturing of the need of the consumer is done. So companies spending a lot of money on IT, which we have done over the past few years. So the dealer is able to forecast it right. And then similar way, no point in locking vendor's inventory for a component. You should be able to forecast back. This transparency from a dealer all the way to vendor is critical for working capital not to get blocked. Because if you start parking inventory in a particular zone between the dealers, sometimes many of the inventory may go dead, and then it deteriorates and you're not able to liquidate. It's better to work on a good forecasting model, very IT driven, which we feel, reduce the inventory carrying cost from 15 days to 7 days, make it more lean. And if you do that, hopefully dealers will become much more, I'll say, profitable and focus on service. Many dealers in commercial vehicle industry were earlier not focusing on service. Last 1 year, we have spent a lot of time to ensure dealer focus well. And I'm sure in going in Euro 6, dealers' roles in a service becomes more important. I think the dealers have to become lean, very, very agile, and work with a very high IT data-driven dealership, and then you can reduce the cost, because dealers should not pack up in this bad time. That's the most critical. We have done a lot of work for the dealer in terms of their hand holding for the next 6 months, so that they don't come out very badly damaged after when in this recession. So we feel dealer and vendor on the other side are the two most critical components, and obviously employees of the company whom we have to ensure, whom we have trained, we retain, and we ensure they are safe. I think, therefore,
yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Seth. I think striking that balance between the dealer force and the workforce is going to be one of the critical areas for a lot of CV OEMs. Now, I come to you, Diego. Now, obviously, you have the APE, which has both a passenger transport option and a goods transport option. Now, with the APE eCity, which is the electric three-wheeler that you have launched, which is passenger transport, how do you see the electric three-wheeler playing a bigger role in your portfolio? Because one of the key areas, that the Indian automotive industry has looked at over the past 6 to 12 months is the impact on electrification, right? Now, COVID-19 globally has kind of also had its own impact on electrification. Now, how do you see the role of the electric three-wheeler or an electric light commercial vehicle changing, especially when we talk about the infrastructure development and how we see the emergence of e-commerce and last mile connectivity as well? So what are your perspectives, in terms of how you see, on the one hand, the electric three-wheeler playing a big role? And also, I asked the same question to you as I asked to Mr. Seth, the health and safety of customers and also your people at the dealerships. So how do you address that?
Well, thanks for the question. Quite, how to say, comprehensive. So let's start first from what is our outlook in terms of evolution of the portfolio and in terms of demand for three-wheeler in the next few months. Basically, we have done some internal assessment, and the idea we have is that there could be a hit on demand for what it concerns passenger vehicle, not only three-wheeler, but in general, all the vehicles that are deputed for shared mobility. Because for sure, restriction will be there, social distancing will be required to maintain, and definitely these are vehicles that usually are meant for, how to say, shared mobility. So there could be, thought on a, how to say, not in a unique manner in India. There could be some area of India where maybe the impact of COVID has been less, that will be impacted. Other areas like typical urban areas like Mumbai, Pune, big metropolitan area that will be more impacted. While instead, for what is concerned good transportation vehicle in general, mainly the ones that are meant for last mile, like our Happy Cargo, there could be definitely a big boost in terms of demand, because we expect that e-commerce will take up quite extensively. We have seen that companies like Amazon and other companies that are, how to say, dedicated to e-commerce have been somehow gaining also from this, how to say, situation on a global basis. So we expect e-commerce will get, and last mile transportation in general will get a big boost. So in general, we expect cargo transportation maybe will be less impacted respect to other categories, segments of the urban mobility. Coming to the matter of electric, I think that there will be again a differentiated kind of response, in the sense that maybe the final customer or the private customer could not take up in terms of demand as we were expecting maybe a few months ago. While instead we expect again B2B opportunity coming up quite fast, mainly in terms of electric mobility, because for sure all these companies that are dedicated to e-commerce will look even more than in the past for very low cost of operation. And definitely electric vehicles are the best solution for keeping cost of operation quite very low. So that's why I think that electric again could be to see some peak in demand, but in specific sector, not maybe the one of private consumer that want to utilize vehicle just to make their own business. I expect for this it will require definitely a development of infrastructure for support of how to say spreading electric mobility, that I don't know at which extent will still be a priority for government in the next 6 to 12 months. Because we expect that priority we go to road construction and let me say other kind of public utility infrastructure, rather than taking up the plan for implementing electric mobility infrastructure in all main cities of India. So again, not a unique, how to say, kind of response. There will be some sector that will revamp better, some sector that maybe will still see sluggish demand for the next few months.
Perfect. Thank you, Diego. Rohit, can we have the second question? The next question, which I would like you to put up, is
sure.
What the participants think will be the guiding factor that will separate the CV player from all the other players in the challenging times. So if you can put that question up online with the options.
Okay, sure. So this upcoming question will have multiple choices. So feel free, like however you want to choose. I'm just launching it. It should be on your screens now.
Yep, excellent. So
Yeah, please.
what do you think will be the deciding factor that will separate the CV player from all other CV players in these challenging times? So please feel free to pick and choose any other, any multiple options you think. I hope you are getting good responses.
Yeah, we are above 50% now. Since it's a longer question, so let's just give a bit of time.
A few more seconds for people to think and answer.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so,
I think we'll be fine.
so yeah, we are above 80% now, so I think we can end the poll.
Yep.
So the result should be on your screen now.
Excellent. So a majority of the people think the ability to manage supply chain and reach end users and customers innovatively. I think this is very much in line with what Mr. mentioned a few minutes ago behind. So thank you very much, everyone, for this participation. So let me now go to Shankar now. Again, a two-part question or a two-part discussion point for you, Shankar. One of the biggest levers for any commercial fleet operator today, be it a large fleet operator like you or even a medium fleet operator, is involvement of telematics, or let's say fleet management solutions, because it's becoming more and more important and relevant these days to be investing in some form of a fleet management solution that is aimed at improving productivity, improving efficiency, and most importantly, improving profitability as well. So that is one part. How you see telematics and fleet management solutions playing a bigger role as we move forward. The second part is the emergence of e-commerce. That's something Diego also mentioned. For a large fleet player, or a player which has, let's say, the bigger trucks plying on national highways across state borders, how do you see the emergence of e-commerce? We have seen a spike actually the past couple of weeks, and that spike is going to continue for the next couple of weeks as well. So how do you see that impacting your business? And also, do you see a role for the smaller vehicle segment, or the LCVs, or the light commercial segments, that transition between the really small last mile delivery solutions and the larger long haul trucks? So if you can address these two parts, one is fleet management solutions, and number two, impact of e-commerce.
Okay, thank you, Kaushik. Interesting question, and let me try and see how I can address the first part first, and then the second part. You're looking at telematics, and I will take a little bit step and say that let's look at overall supply chain visibility and what it does to manage in these times of uncertainty. If I were to look at supply chain visibility in this time, one is, there has to be a demand supply synchronization. And if that needs to happen end to end, and Nitin spoke about how do you forecast, how do you plan your demand inventory, and then right across the value chain, how are you going to give end to end visibility? And there are two components of this visibility. One is how do you digitize your entire activity so that everything is available real time, and therefore everybody is able to adjust their production demand to match in a manner in which because that's the most important component of how are you agile and how are you managing it most efficiently, so that you are not building something which is not required by the market. So that's the first part of it. And there, supply chain companies do play a role, and inventory on wheels is going to be one of the ways in which you are going to manage it. And if we were to give it end-to-end visibility, and that's where 3PL players like come on way and try to manage it. The other part of visibility and telematics would be, how do you use your asset better? How are you going to make it more productive? And how are you going to ensure that it doesn't, I mean, the wheels have to always rotate. So if the entire supply chain is managed in a very agile manner, if you are able to provide end-to-end visibility, that's where, you know, a large component of companies like us can do is, how do you plan and how do you source and how do you deliver it on time at the right moment for the right kind of consumption, whichever be the service industry that you're serving, would ensure and help your asset is better utilized. And therefore, telematics or the fleet management system, whether it's small or large, it doesn't matter, comes in a bigger manner, that I ensure that it's optimally used. I ensure that the fleet is always up and running. I am able to manage the overall asset management cost, whether it is operational cost or whether it is maintenance cost, and ensuring that the live asset is very well utilized. So that's where I think that it will play a very significant role. We are a large company, but a fully asset-light company. That means there are many companies which are associated with us. 100% of the assets are, right? It is just that we don't own the financial ownership of those assets. And therefore, we are able to manage it very well for them. And even a small operator who comes on board gets all these facilities that are there, whether it is from a point of simple visibility to the point of managing the vehicle or to the point of managing it end of usage cycle. All these aspects come on a platter to him, and which is what we are doing when we have created some platforms. And we also have a platform called iLoads. The second part of your question was more around last mile e-commerce and LCV, etc. I'll address it in a different manner. Of course, the amount of goods that are going to be consumed from the traditional channels to the e-commerce channels is increasing, was always increasing, and is all the more going to increase because of all this restrictions that are coming on retail trade, restrictions that are coming on, you know, ability for people to go out and, you know, shop, etc. That would be, there is going to be a social dimension of shift in the way consumption is going to happen. If I want to disaggregate the entire e-commerce, I would put it into a couple of things. One is, there is this first mile consolidation from vendor to a fulfillment center. Then there is a management of a fulfillment center. And then there is the middle mile or the going up to the last mile. And then there is a delivery to the last point of consumption. In every stage, obviously different category of vehicles are going to be looked at, and different categories going to come on. And this is going to be a way the things are going to be happening. As a company, we also have our own last mile business that are there. We serve, we are not so much into B2C, but into B2B in many things that we are there. Various category of vehicles are being used, right from a biker delivery for a spare parts to a return management and I also see many of the retailers, one pivot that they are taking is, how are they also becoming an online and an e-commerce platform? I mean, the largest retailer in the country, Reliance, is taking a big bet on their e-commerce platform. They've tied up with Facebook, etc. You're all read it, and that's going to be a very big shift. And the way they are planning the last mile, I mean, some of the companies like us are already working with them on that. Then there are the other companies like, you know, they're also trying to see, with the consumption going in, this typical biker kind of a methodology may not be the best methodology. In many cities, we are using LCVs to aggregate it and sell it. And there are companies like DMart, etc. in Bombay, which are also started an e-commerce platform, pivoted quickly in the last 2 weeks. So a lot of, you know, a multi-modal kind of a delivery that will happen. The offline-online combination is becoming a reality now. It's not going to be pure e-commerce, marketplace-driven e-commerce, but more from a, how do you use the existing ecosystem of retail network, whether it is a Kirana store-led delivery, which is what Reliance is planning, or whether some of the online players are also going offline, and some of the retail players are also coming. So I think this is going to be a kind of a multimodal kind of a operation that's going to happen. And I think therefore the solutions are going to be different. Therefore, LCVs, which was your question, is going to play a very significant role in which we can aggregate and give it. Because the whole idea is, how am I optimally using my load? How am I planning those routes and network optimization by the day? And there are a lot of SaaS players or a lot of 3PL players who can do it. How do I consolidate and how do I optimally deliver it? So I think the game is going to be changing from a simple standard delivery to a very network driven, optimized, planned, and obviously a lot more is going to be agile, technology driven delivery models.
Absolutely. It's brilliant point, Shankar. Brilliant points. I think to summarize, O2O, the key points are O2O, multimodal delivery options, and freight aggregation. So I think these will be the key operating points going forward. So Rohit, can we have the next question? What I want to ask is, do participants think that home delivery of commercial vehicles or doorstep delivery of commercial vehicles will also become a norm as passenger vehicle OEMs have started doing it? So that is something I really want to know what participants think. If we have that question online, please.
The question should be on your screen now.
Excellent, excellent. So this is a very simple question, and with the answer options are also simple. Do you see doorstep delivery of commercial vehicles as well, which the passenger vehicle OEMs have started doing, right? So the customer does not need to come to the dealership anymore. So what do participants think? It's a very simple question. If you can give us your answers. Do we have enough answers?
Yeah, we are over 80% now. Just the results will be displayed in. Should be on your screen now.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I'm happy to see that half the respondents feel that home delivery or doorstep delivery of commercial vehicles also should be a norm. Obviously, for large fleet operators, the actual decision making and the deal actually happens at the premises itself. But for smaller individual customers, I think the OEMs also need to look at doorstep delivery, to maintain confidence, to remove the fear of contamination, at least in the short to medium term. So excellent, good to hear that. So with this, I'll come to you, Shailesh. One of the key areas that again, that is very unique to Cummins today is that you have a business not only in the mobility space, which is the commercial vehicle space, but also in the energy storage sector, right? So we already have Cummins being the engine supplier to, let's say, for example, the grid support, telecom operators for engines and so on. So how do you see, again, it's a two-part question. One is, how do you see similarities, in developing products or technology roadmap that are applicable to both the on-highway and the off-highway applications? That's number one. Number two, again, something I asked Diego as well. How do you see the role of electrification here? Do you see some of the combustion engines being replaced by battery-operated technologies or battery storage systems? As somebody who plays a role in both these areas, how do you see the transition? How do you see overlap between the mobility applications and the energy storage applications?
Thanks, Kaushik. I think to answer your first part in terms of synergies in different business, and notably talk about on-highway business where we provide solutions for trucks and buses. The construction equipment segment, which is where we are present largely in the off-highway market, working with all the major OEMs. And third is the genset market, where we have majority of the market share on the medium and large gensets. So one important thing, Kaushik, which is happening is maybe 5 to 10 years ago, we had the emission norms at different levels and quite varied when we talk about these three different segments, when you talk about on-highway, off-highway, and genset. Going forward, I think the major change which is happening, as you've seen, the on-highway always leads. You have CV following, and then the genset industry also following. And going forward from 2020 onwards, you'll see a lot of cities or a lot of convergence on the emission norms coming up at the engine level when you're talking about on-highway, off-highway, and possibly CBCV4 plus, in gensets coming up expected in 2022. So that helps certainly in a lot of value chain leverage across the segments, and we have now upcoming platforms which could address with the same engine but with slight different recipes on the architecture on the after treatment. We could address a same platform with different applications for on-highway construction equipment and also genset. So that convergence of emission is certainly helping us in common development spends, similar value chain, lesser value chain, lesser complexity in the overall product portfolio, and hence leveraging the volume over a large application, and hence the business case becoming more better viable, and localization being helped with the larger volumes. So that's a major advantage which we see on similarities on this different segments where we operate. Coming to your second question on the electrification, I think this has been a point of discussion where certainly it's driven by the purpose and it's variable depending upon what the application is and what's the purpose you want to meet in terms of objective of different segments. And we have seen consistencies on highway where the mass mobility has been the front runner in this, in the urban bus segment where electrification has been dominant, followed by certainly small commercial vehicles, last mile deliveries, where because of the operation, the duty cycles and the way they operate in a limited range, limited geographical areas, those are the first ones to find solutions on electrification. And I don't think that changing, in near future, and possibly with last mile delivery expected to grow with e-commerce. I see that more uptick there on smaller commercial vehicles on the electrification. On the larger side, larger vehicles, I think we'll have a mix of technologies where we see hydrogen coming up prominently supporting, and it's not about either battery or fuel cell. I think it's a combination of fuel cell and battery which would play a major role in longer distance application, in applications where payload is quite sensitive, and that's where we see maybe next 5-7 years, the fuel cell picking up in the applications which are payload sensitive, and we expect some pilot projects coming up in this space, and government has acknowledged that I think hydrogen is the future, and there's been a lot of efforts going on in terms of capability development in that space, and building the value chain and making the industry ready for that kind of scenario where we complement electrification in the shorter distances with fuel cell in the longer distances, and take care of the sustainable energy security for the sector.
Absolutely. I think very good point, Shailesh. I think primarily driven by emission regulations, both for CPCB, for energy storage, stationary applications, and BS6 and eventually BS7 norms. So I agree with you, having the right solution for the right application is going to be the key going forward. So I think that ties in perfectly into Dr. Mukherjee's product portfolio. But before that, can we have the last question? Rohit, what I want the question to come up on is, which of the following factors which participants think will give the maximum boost to the CV demand or CV growth. It's a multiple choice question. And if we can have the options, I'd like to see what participants think will be the key driving factors or the key factors to drive growth. If we can have it, there you go.
Yeah,
so please feel free to choose multiple options as you wish. Scrappage scheme, incentives on GST, extended moratorium on EMI payments, something that's very, very important, and the government's economic stimulus package.
Just give a few seconds. We're almost at 60%.
Yep, excellent. Excellent. Can we have the answers now?
Yeah, just allow me 5 more seconds. I'm just waiting
Yep.
for it to turn 80%.
Perfect.
This should be on your screen now.
Excellent. So let's look at the answers. Scrappage scheme leads the way. No surprises there. Clearly, we have an aging population and there is a need to replace some of the older vehicles with the newer generation vehicles. But after that, there seems to be a bit of a split consensus. There is no single clear winner apart from the scrappage scheme. There is a mixed response for rebate on GST, moratorium on EMI payments, economic stimulus package, and everything. So there seems to be a clear winner on scrappage scheme. So that's a very good indication there. I think a lot of the panelists here will also agree with that we need a comprehensive scrappage scheme. So with that, I'll come to you, Dr. Mukherjee. One of the, in fact, I read an article very recently that, almost 200 crores were invested. You made investments to the tune of close to 200 crores just before the COVID-19 pandemic hit us all. Now, obviously, your focus, your product focus is on low cost of ownership, number one. That is the key selling point. And also, I'm very happy, that you're one of the early adopters of lithium-ion battery as well, because we have still seen a lot of the players in this space who still go for lead-acid solutions, which in my opinion is not the right or not the optimum package for an application like yours. So congratulations on having the lithium-ion battery. So my discussion point with you is, today we are already talking about new business models focusing on low TCO, such as battery swapping or even battery leasing, basically taking the cost of the battery out of the equation, right? If you take that out of the equation, suddenly it becomes much more attractive and on par with, let's say, IC engined vehicles. So how do you see adopting new business models, either swapping or battery leasing, to just encourage a lot of your customers to adopt electric three-wheelers or goods transport vehicles? And do you see any positive response from the customers as well? Do they see battery swapping or leasing as a viable solution, for their normal operating conditions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kaushik, thank you very much. I think this is a very, very important question, and I would like to address it. First of all, the electrification is going to happen. It is a global trend now, and many global companies have announced their plans, either immediate plans or over a period of time, they have announced their plans to come up with electric vehicles. So India is not going to remain, untouched by it. We are going to see I see there are three factors to this electrification. One is the government policy, the environmental regulations, etc. And secondly, the technology maturity. Now the technology is mature. We have, for example, lithium-ion, which is top of the race right now. Tomorrow maybe something else comes, we don't know. But today lithium-ion battery technology is fairly mature and gives a good mileage. It also ensures a safe vehicle, which is very important because of high temperature generation, etc. in the Indian conditions specifically. And third is obviously the economics. The cost of running is obviously much cheaper than the IC engines. So these are the three enablers that I see to the whole electrification drive. It is going to happen, in a calibrated manner in India, because things evolve here over a period of time. And I'm sure government is going to come up with infrastructure related, things like many public sectors are working. We are also working with some of the big public sectors for creation of the battery charging stations, for example, in the same premise as the refueling stations. So then, so that that range anxiety goes out of the mind of the user, that I'm running out of battery. And the second, the point you touched is the whole battery swapping technology. See, that is also going to come in, I think, in two-wheeler, which is our product. This is going to be a big business enabler, because you see, three-wheeler is for commercial use. Nobody buys three-wheeler for personal. It is a business enabler for the user. He's earning out of this, running it. So the uptime is very important, maybe 18 hours, 20 hours, whatever. So the quick charging or the downtime has to be kept minimal. So one way is have a quick charging, which is the technology is still evolving. We are not yet to few minutes or under an hour still. I think there is still time to go. But the other way is the battery swapping. Now, swapping has its own challenges. There are some technology challenges, standardizations, and the connectors and ease of swapping, etc. So I think those are going to be solved in the near future. Already in Bangalore, Pune, Chandigarh, companies have started doing in certain pockets. So I do see that happening very soon, because it takes out straight away the cost of battery, which is typically almost 50% of the total vehicle cost today. So that and the whole range increases significantly. And the last point I would like to make is that we are our company, we have modeled our business not only as a vehicle manufacturer, but we see ourselves as a mobility solution provider. As Shankar mentioned, that they are quite asset light, and we do see this happening more and more. And the more inquiries we get from the e-commerce players are on these lines only. Everybody wants to be asset light today because of obviously capex and other operational reasons. So in our case, we see ourselves as providing the complete mobility solution to our customer from end to end. I provide the vehicle, I provide the operator, I also take care of the entire maintenance and service and all the issues. And this is all backed by a solid technology platform that we have in-house. Our technology guides the vehicles, allocates the vehicles, and also captures hundreds of data points, which also include the optimization of routes and the whole operational problems. So that is, I think, going to be more and more in this kind of business, because it is essentially a service business. Vehicle manufacturing is just incidental to us. We have the technology and we want to leverage it and provide the entire solution to our customer. So I can provide my vehicle with all the telematics and all the data, and today technology is there. It is integration of several technologies like GPS and optics and cameras and all. So on a real-time basis, we are able to capture data and also provide the customer those data. He can also make use of that. What is the, for example, the travel profile, the point of use, also the customer profile, and so on and so forth. And those are very useful for the business. So as far as I see this business model going in future, it is going to be a mix of all these models, not only straight away selling and sort of one-time sale. It's going to be complete solution providing business to our customers.
Excellent. Dr. Mukherjee, very valid points to make, especially for the customer segment that you're operating in. Having a minimal downtime is one of the primary factors. So anything that is going to help them achieve this is going to be a hit with the customer. So I'm very glad that you're already taking the steps in that right direction. Gentlemen, I must apologize. I have another webinar and I might have to duck out right now. But I'm handing over to Rohit, who's going to wrap up and maybe if you have the time for a few more minutes, take a couple of audience question and answer. I must apologize once again. Thank you very much for everyone, for all the panelists. It's been a great, wonderful discussion, and I'll be in touch with you again. Thank you very much, Rohit, as well, for the wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you. I hope the panelists are okay if we do a few questions. I mean, okay, great. So I'll just jump straight into the question. Mr. Seth, there are a few questions that have been asked regarding, the emission norms. For example, what will happen with the BS4 pending inventory, and also, BS6 is only allowed to be sold now. So what are the challenges? How to overcome that? So both are sort of tied into each other. If you could address that.
Okay. As far as BS4 inventory is concerned, as you're aware, Supreme Court gave us a direction with the petition filed by the FADA for all the auto companies, and we were supposed to declare the inventory on 31st of March, which was sold but not registered. I'll say 90, and there was a chart petition filed. I could see that since the lockdown, and Supreme Court said 10 days after the lockdown is open, you should be able to register. I saw the data yesterday, which has been shared in public domain by the FADA. 95% of those vehicles have already got registered. Now, since the lockdown is not open in many places, there is a 5% inventory which is still with the dealers, which is unregistered. Hopefully, lockdown, once it opens, it register. But yes, there is still an element of vehicles which were never sold by some of the dealers. And I can say majority of them were actually from certain OEM for two-wheelers. I think that inventory is a challenge for that OEM to handle it. But I'll say, since I've seen the data across the OEMs, which was submitted to Supreme Court, I'll say majority of OEMs are out of the problems with the Supreme Court ruling. Coming to that is one question. Second thing, BS6 emission challenge, yes, the price will go up and has gone up. So there will be a demand challenge for you to, in a COVID scenario, to generate a demand for a BS6 when the price of vehicle has gone up is going to be a challenging times. But that's a BS norm. But scrappage policy is one reason why I think a lot of the audience said that, why scrappage is important. Because if you scrap the older vehicles, it generates not only demands, it also takes out the older generation emission norm vehicles. So I'll say this scrappage policy is for both. Take the old generation vehicle out, which are old emissions, and also generate a demand for a newer BS6 norm vehicles. So I think these are the two answers you were looking for.
Okay, great. So quickly jumping into the next one. So owing to demand fall because of COVID and all of that, so some of the questions that what they're asking is in terms of electrification. Okay, so is that going to be put on the back burner, or and more focus will be on ICE, or is that not the case? Are we going to see some EV, LCVs, and HCVs soon? So maybe Diego or Dr. Dev, any of you, like whoever would like to take that.
And maybe I put my point, as
sure.
I said already before. I think that it will be a mixed response. I'm sure that I'm quite confident that in terms of B2B business, electric application for two-wheeler will get a big boost. While maybe we would not seen the same kind of effort for what is concerned private customer. So according to me, there will be a mixed response.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I agree to what Diego said. B2B segment, especially the segment in which we operate, is three-wheeler, and I do see three-wheelers and two-wheelers are going to be the adopters of electrification technology. So this is going to happen. I don't think it is going to get delayed. The technology is there. In fact, there is a supply chain in India where all the battery, the powertrain, which are the key elements of EV, are available. So I do see this going to be a bigger push towards EV in the three-wheeler side.
Okay, great. So now we'll jump to the last question. This one's to Mr. Shankar R. So some of the people are asking that, in terms of logistics cost is already high in India. Owing to the restrictions, a lot of, the logistic cost, would you think first it will rise because owing to the COVID restrictions and all of that, the way goods are transported? And do you feel that railways is going to get some advantage in transportation vis-a-vis road transportation?
Okay, a couple of things. One is, logistics cost as a percentage of GDP is the highest in the world, or one of the highest in the world. It's 13% GDP. Yes, in many developed countries, it's anywhere between 8 and 10%. Government of India has taken a mandate, and CII and is working along with the government to bring it down to 10%. This is all pre-COVID data in the next 3 years' time. By 2024, last year, this mandate was given to the Department of Logistics under the Ministry of Commerce. So having said that, post-COVID situation, is anything going to be changing dramatically and drastically? One of the things that we should understand, I think, is that the logistics cost is high, not necessarily because the cost of operation is high, but it's because of a lot of wastage that is there in the supply chain per se. There is a cost of, there is a lot of truck utilization is not to the optimal levels. There was a lot of, interstate movement. There were these border checkposts were there. Lot many things ensured that if you have to do a trip from, say, a 2,500 kilometer trip from Chennai to Delhi, earlier it used to be in the pre-GST days, taking about 120 hours. It had come down to 96. Now you can do it 89 hours very conveniently. So if you are able to eliminate leakages and wastages, be it in terms of inventory, be it in terms of, agricultural produce, which is a large component of supply chain cost across when we measure it in GDP, losses that is happening, it could be pilferages, it could be because of perishables not being stored properly and sent properly. Once you eliminate all these things, logistics cost as a percentage of GDP will certainly come down. But yes, in the interim period of next 3 to 6 months time, there is going to be a challenge on logistics cost for two reasons. One is truck utilization is going to be a challenge, though demand is also subdued, but because of following all the safety norms, which is very important, there is going to be a demand on people and truck utilization. So you will find a demand supply mismatch in the interim period, a little bit of a cost going up. But overall, I see that the 5-year plan taken by the Government of India, which industry is working very closely with, there are clear action plans which will reduce supply chain costs and all the wastages that get eliminated in between. If we say our logistics spend is $250 billion and 320, if you take wastages, that is where that extra 150 billion is getting spent on. If that can be reduced, I think beyond 6 months, I don't see any, any reason why our target that the government has set for the industry to work upon will be, there will be any major problem in going towards that path.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, sir. We've already overshot the session by 20 minutes. So I think, we need to stop now. I'm sure, I'm really sorry to the audience. I can't address all your questions. We have over 100 questions. So I'm really sorry we don't have time for that much. So I would like to end this by, first of all, thanking the speakers. Thank you so much for your time. I really apologize. We overshot by 15-20 minutes, but a very informative session. We are getting very good feedback. So thank you so much. And secondly, to our attendees, we were completely packed. So thank you so much for your overwhelming response. And, we will be sharing a post-webinar report where we will capture all the results, some of the key takeaways. We will also be sharing a video recording of all this. And obviously we will be coming up with many more, webinars and discussions like this, because that is the new reality that we have now. So with that, I would like to, thank everyone and end this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.